Okay, so do we think we're good to start? It's a little after 1, so I don't want to run too
Uh,
late here.
are people joining with video as well, or is it just
I think they're
audio?
keeping their videos off. I believe they're
Okay.
keeping their videos off.
They can ask me questions and things. Well, I'll say something about that.
Right,
They
there's a
can.
chat, and I'll be monitoring the chat.
Okay,
Um,
great.
and right, so people can unmute themselves.
All right.
So hopefully we have everyone who signed up for this. Hi, everyone. You should be in the room for using motivational interviewing skills to build collaboration and cooperation with senior clients. So that's the presentation you're going to hear for this breakout session. And again, I think we're ready to go. My name is Karen Blutkin. I'm a supervisor in the long-term care department at Bucks County Area Agency on Aging. And it's my pleasure to get to introduce the speaker today. But before I do that, I just want to mention a few housekeeping matters to keep things running smoothly. So yes, please, if you can, mute yourself and keep your video off throughout the presentation. And unless Barb tells us otherwise, you can ask questions through the chat box. And then at the end, we can also open it up for questions. So each session is being recorded, and it's going to be available on Bucks County Community College's YouTube page within a week or two of this symposium. And then Barb's PowerPoint presentation will also be available under her name on that YouTube page. So again, just in order to make sure you're receiving your continuing ed credits for today, you need to complete the evaluation form by the end of the day. That was sent by email. And so I would like to introduce our speaker today. Barbara Orr has over 38 years of experience working as an inpatient counselor, juvenile probation officer, adolescent and family therapist, and supervisor of juvenile justice programs. She holds a BS in sociology from Shippensburg University and an MS in clinical psychology from Millersville University, my alma mater, just an aside,
All right.
and received training at the Philadelphia Child Guidance Clinic in family systems work. So she served as an adjunct professor in the psychology department at Millersville University. She currently trains and consults full-time with agencies, facilities, and organizations that provide services to families and older adults, as well as to private businesses. So Barbara, thank you for being here today and for
My
sharing all your
pleasure.
knowledge.
My pleasure. Thanks for
Give you the
inviting me
floor.
back. All right. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to be presenting, although this is a very shortened version of my typically 1.5 to 2 day workshop on motivational interviewing, which gives us a lot of practice time. I'm happy to provide this primer, if you will, this preliminary introduction to an extremely effective communication approach. It is not counseling or therapy, even though I think Wikipedia still calls it that, but it augments those things. But anybody on the planet really who's having conversations with someone else whereby you want to influence them to at least consider a change in behavior, doing things differently, trying something new. This approach has been around since the early 80s. Don't have time to go into a lot of detail about how it developed, but it did come from originally the drug and alcohol field, where there's a lot of resistance and defensiveness for lots of reasons. And through clinical trials through the years, it has been shown to be extremely effective in nudging people toward change. You know, we don't want to push people, even though sometimes as helpers, as change agents, we might get frustrated, or maybe we're worried about someone, or we're just kind of tired of trying to get them to do something that would be good for them. Um, we might push or be forceful, but decades of research has proven to us that those things aren't, at very best, are neutral, but more often than not backfire and actually ratchet up more resistance from the very person that we're hoping to influence. And so motivational interviewing gives us the skills and the demeanor and the atmosphere in which we can more effectively form a rapport with people and use some skills to um, slowly but surely, although sometimes it happens rather quickly because it's so effective, move people in the direction of change, at least thinking about change, hopefully beginning to talk about making a change, and then ideally we love to witness the change happening. That's what we're aiming for, but all of those sort of periods of change are important. Here's a very simple definition of motivational interviewing. It's an evidence-based communication approach proven effective in influencing, quote, resistant people to change. And I'll tell you why I have that in quotes. I do want to remind everybody I'm happy to answer questions or provide more examples. So please let me know if I can make something clear or give examples that can illuminate how these things work in real life. So you can just unmute yourself and talk to me, or you can put it in chat. I have resistant in quotes or semi-quotes for a good reason, and that is that we often use the word resistant in a pejorative way. Usually when we say somebody's resistant, we're throwing our eyes in the air, sort of, titch, they're resistant, or we're frustrated. I just want to remind everyone that resistance is actually an important part of human behavior. In fact, if we had no resistance to anything, and sometimes we work with clients where that's true, their boundaries have been squashed, or, they don't really think for themselves, or they just let anybody sort of tell them what to do. That can be a dangerous place to be in, because then you're influenced by anybody and everything, and you're really likely to be victimized or used or misused. And so I call it detoxifying resistance, that it's not that we want to get rid of resistance in people, because that's a dangerous place to be. But what we really mean is they're too resistant about too many things, too often. And so in that way, people get in their own way. And when I say people, I mean all of us. We all have changes that we should make, or somebody has helped us see we ought to make, and we dig our heels in. We don't want to do it. It's scary to us. It doesn't really make sense. We don't feel ready. We don't think we have the skills to do it. It goes against the habits that I'm used to, all kinds of reasons. So, keep that in mind, if you would, as we're going through this material. This isn't about trying to trick somebody into change or kind of dictate a change to somebody. There's a danger in that, in case we're wrong, or maybe we don't know enough about them or their life to really offer them the best idea. And really, motivational interviewing collaborates with the individual in, trying to find the best change for them and helping them make a decision to change. So the rationale for so many people learning this really around the world, I mean, police officers are learning it, nurses and doctors are learning it, front, line workers of all kinds are using it, residential workers, detention people, prisons, in large part because it helps, mostly because it helps with quote unquote resistant people, but also it tends to make things easier for the worker. It reduces burnout because we're no longer sort of fighting with or going toe to toe with people. And so there have been hundreds of clinical trials over the decades in all different types of populations, smokers, drug users and addicts, obesity trials, people of all ages in residential communities and out in the community, people on parole, probation, all different kinds of populations where one would expect that there would be, defensiveness, bricks in the wall against the helper, and resistance. And over again, it's been shown to be, remarkably effective in not only helping people take some of the bricks out of the wall, be a little less resistant, but actually inviting people to make these changes that we're talking about um, of all kinds. As I said, it came originally from the drug and alcohol field. William Miller was the original. He started tabulating the things that he found to be particularly useful in reducing resistance in clients. And also, just as importantly, he was noting, tabulating really, the kinds of behaviors that helpers used that actually increased resistance. And there's a lot of them. I know early in my career, until I learned better, I started out in the DNA field. Things were done in a very confrontational, adversarial, toe to toe kind of way. And it didn't feel good to me. I saw the results of that. These were adolescent boys we were working with. It tended to get them angry and vengeful and frustrated or feel shame. And I didn't, I quickly realized something is amiss. And then, over the years, in a way by default, I learned a number of things differently. And then when I learned about motivational interviewing, it really tightened up my skills and the atmosphere I set with clients that has the best chance of inviting people to actually, at the very least, consider thinking about change. So William Miller was joined eventually by Stephen Rolnick, and they really clarified in this approach that they named motivational interviewing what works with resistant clients and what decidedly does not. So, I want to try to make that clear in this hour and a half as best I can. And I would really urge you to do some more reading about it. I do at the end of the PowerPoint. You don't have it on your PowerPoint because I just added it to this one. An article about motivational interviewing with elderly people. And there's lots of articles out there just to even further your understanding of this approach because it's so incredibly useful. In fact, I specialize in this workshop. I have dozens of topics that I teach to human service folks, but the two that I do most are motivational interviewing and trauma-informed care, and they certainly go hand in hand. Motivational interviewing goes hand in hand with all kinds of modalities, techniques. It really augments the things that you already do that are very effective. And it substitutes for some things that maybe we need to not do so much anymore. So one of my favorite things about it is when you really get a feel for what it is and what it does, you can't help but use it in your own life. Because we're always having conversations with people that we love in our families, our friends, our partners, colleagues, not just clients, where we would like to influence them to consider doing something different or deciding something different. So I really recommend that you maybe dig a little deeper even after this symposium. So if I only had 4 or 5 minutes to do a presentation, and I'm sorry that I can't use a pointer for this, but I hope you can follow along. I came up with this really simple diagram years ago to really kind of drive home for someone that I was doing some follow-up motivational interviewing training to really help them get the gist of what MI is really for. And lots of people have said they like this diagram, so it's really a central part of my presentations now. The main purpose of MI, so you can see MI there and an arrow going up and a red asterisk. And the red asterisk stands for the discrepancies, the discrepancy awareness that we want to raise. The main gist, the main purpose of motivational interviewing is to raise other people's awareness of how behaviors they have get in the way of their vision. Now, I want to say something about vision. Instead of goal, I use the word vision. Goal can be part of vision, but honestly, vision is just much more inclusive. It's broader, it's deeper, It includes a person's vision, and everybody has one, even if they don't call it that. Everybody has uh, a vision of that has components of how they would like their life to look or feel or be. And it's made up of countless things. But vision includes things like who matters to me, which relationships matter the most, what do I want to have access to, what do I want to do, how do I want to feel about myself, how do I want others to feel about me and treat me, how much does money matter, how much does freedom matter, independence, what do I want to try, what do I want to achieve. It's so many things. And it's really important for us to learn some things about our client's vision. And so elderly people certainly have a vision of a life that they would prefer. As we get older, certain things become impossible for us, but there are many, many, many other things that are still possibilities, and we can even help people add to their vision. So vision is anything that if you ask somebody, in a life I prefer, and then, fill in the blank, right? So in a life I prefer, I get to see my daughter every week. In a life I prefer, I still retain some of my independence. In a life I prefer, I get to eat whatever I want to eat. In a life I prefer, I don't want people always telling me what to do. It can be so many things that clients say to us that we might ignore otherwise, but now that you know what vision is, you can perk up your ears and realize, I'm going to take note of that. Because that's really the hook to get somebody to consider change, to help them see what's in it for them, how much closer, if you will, to their vision they can get if they change a behavior or more than one behavior. Because when everybody has behaviors that get in the way of a life they prefer. Maybe I snack too much at night, but my vision includes losing 15 pounds so that I'm healthier and can live longer for my grandchildren, right? But there's a discrepancy because I snack too much. Maybe I eat. Another one might be, I really want to be my part of my vision and life I prefer. I get to go places and do things, but my behavior includes not taking my medication and not getting fresh air and exercise. So we all have discrepancies, and the elderly folks with whom you work certainly do. And the reason that this diagram is important is over on the right, you'll see a statement that says human beings are driven to resolve discrepancies when made aware of them. Well, that's taken directly from motivational psychology. And quite frankly, a lot of MI comes from that subset of psychology. And what we know from motivational psychology is, this is just the way humans are, when we're made aware of our discrepancies, when we become painfully aware of them, how behaviors we have are getting in the way of a life we prefer, then we feel compelled to shrink that discrepancy by changing a behavior. But human beings are really good at this. I'll look away from that. I'll pretend it doesn't exist. I'll, la, la, la. I'll minimize that discrepancy. I might deny it. I'll make excuses for it. I'll rationalize about it. But I don't really want to look at it. I don't want to see it because once I see it, then I'm driven to reduce or get rid of that discrepancy. And guess what? That's going to take work. It's going to be uncomfortable for a while at least. It's going to take effort. I might have to learn new coping skills or other skills to do it, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll just keep kind of putting it on the back shelf and kind of pretending it doesn't exist. But along comes a helper like you who, through the skills of this approach, can gently but firmly, and consistently turn the person's face toward these discrepancies without shame, without humiliating them, without lecturing them or being confrontational. Now a person is facing this discrepancy awareness, and they are much more likely to, even if they don't feel like making the change, which is often, they're much more likely to start doing it anyway because they start to see what is in it for them to make a change. At this point, I just want to ask if anybody has any questions. If I can make this diagram more clear or give more examples. Does anybody in the audience want to share a discrepancy that they can think of from your elderly population? You know, what's a behavior that one of your folks, one of your clients has that is mucking up their vision, getting in the way of a life that they have indicated they would prefer, something about their life they wish were different? Okay. I just like to give people an opportunity. So let me just give you one more example before we move from this diagram. It could be something as simple as, the vision that the elderly person who's your client has indicated includes being healthy enough and having enough energy to go on, the bus trips that their local agency provides. Okay, so they have talked about it. They love the theater, they like going with other folks, they like getting out, and just getting out of the city that they live in, etc. So that's a piece of their vision. But a behavior or two that they have is they stay up all night watching TV and they don't catch up on their sleep, so they're sort of regularly sleep deprived. And in addition to that, they're not doing the physical therapy that they were prescribed. Okay, so they're not getting better physically, and the sleep deprivation on top of it is just making them feel worse. They're not really up to going on a trip like that. And that would be a painful discrepancy. And on the one hand, they really want to do those things, but on the other hand, several things that are required to get them prepared to do them or capable of doing them, they're not engaging in it. And we can lecture to that person from now till eternity, but probably all of us have recognized that lectures don't usually have much of an effect. I'm going to talk about this on this slide. So I'll say more about lectures in a minute, but let me just get through this list of what MI is not, because that kind of cleans it up and paves the way for what it actually is. And so all the things on this list have been shown to, at their very best, they're probably neutral. They don't really do much. But more often than not, these things tend to increase resistance in people that we're trying to influence. So let's start with judgmental at the top. We know that human beings are not really made to tolerate much judgment. We all know what it's like having a judgy friend or family member, and we kind of try to stay away from them. We don't sit next to them at Thanksgiving, maybe. Because who wants somebody in their life that's always calling you out? And another thing you do wrong, and you ought to do this, and I can't believe you don't do that. And human beings really aren't comfortable with that. It's something that we try to get away from, if you will. But I think inadvertently sometimes, if a client's behavior doesn't match our value system, or it doesn't seem to make common sense, or it just seems foolish or ridiculous, we can get a little bit of an edgy tone, right, in our voices. And certainly our facial expressions might be kind of judgy, the furrowed brow and kind of looking at somebody sideways. And we have to be really careful about that, because clients pick up on body language before they even pick up on words. And if we're being judgmental, it invites people to simply kind of put a wall up and not really be open to what we have to say. And besides, maybe my value system doesn't fit their value system. So, there's that issue as well that we need to be careful about. You can have whatever judgment you want about anything, but put it on a shelf. You don't drag it into the room between yourself and the client as if trying to judge somebody into changing works, because it doesn't. some of us were raised in families or religions or communities where judgmentalism was used really heavily. And it feels really bad. It'll stop a behavior in the here and now because somebody just wants to sort of get you off their back. But um, if we live in a situation where too much judgmentalism is used, it can actually create psychological problems. It's really something that can create almost a psychological injury, especially if somebody is susceptible to low self-esteem and things like that. So we stay away from being judgmental, and MI gives us the skills to do that. It's also not toe-to-toe, adversarial. That's what sometimes we work with clients and they come in ready, right, for a fight, thinking you're going to try to force me, you're against me, you don't like me, you don't understand me. The last thing we want to do is meet it with our own resistance, right? And kind of take it personally or sort of, try to push back. We want to turn it into a collaboration, side by side. Another thing MI is not is confrontational. Now, certainly, you need to confront people about a behavior that maybe, you didn't take your medicine or you didn't come to the group or you haven't been doing your exercises. But confrontational, AL are the operative letters, is really that sort of style that's in your face and repetitive and maybe loud and threatening. And certainly if I keep, sort of yelling or being sort of pushy with this person. And another thing, in kind of that style, surely any minute they'll say, "Oh, Barb, thank God you're in my life and I'm ready to change." That's not true. Actually, of all of these 5 things, being confrontational tends to ratchet up resistance 2 to 4 times that in a person. That's the exact opposite that we want. So we actually make our jobs more unpleasant and more difficult when we're confrontational because of what it does in the other person. If we're confrontational or adversarial, we really are just inviting the other person to not pay attention to what we're trying to get them to think of, to do differently. They're just paying attention to us coming at them. And now you have somebody who's even more defensive, and they're not really in a place that they want to sort of calmly discuss a behavior change. Another thing that MI is decidedly not is argumentative. If we get frustrated with people or maybe we're worried about them because they keep doing the same harmful thing or whatever it might be, and we think, I have facts, and with these facts and with my articulate style, I'll certainly be able to argue this person into change and they'll thank me. And really, arguing is another invitation. Sometimes when we try to argue people into change, it's a little tempting for them to just dig their heels in and argue even harder for the thing that they're already doing, even if they're not really even vested in it. And it takes a lot of psychic energy out of us. Actually, all the things on this list take a lot of psychic energy out of helpers with little to no, positive results, and actually more likely that we've made our job harder for ourselves because we've ratcheted up resistance in our clients. The last thing on the list might be a little kind of out of place, it seems, but persuasion also has been proven to usually backfire, especially if someone is resistant. And the reason is because persuasion feels kind of slimy sometimes. It kind of seems suspect. If a person really is defensive or resistant to change, it's kind of like you're trying to manipulate me with your idea, and it's your stuff, right? It's kind of like you're saying, open your mouth, and here's the spoon of medicine, and you're going to take, let me persuade you to take this. And the other difficulty, or I should say the other problem with persuasion is usually when we're using persuasion, we're coming from our own, limited worldview, experience, judgment, value system, moral system, and even if you fancy yourself a very open-minded person, we're all limited to some degree by our biases, by our experience, etc. And I might persuade somebody into doing something that backfires in their life, that might even be harmful to them, just because I think it's a good idea, and somehow I should give this piece of advice and try to talk somebody into doing it. So there's that also that I want to avoid. And so persuasion really, you might be able to sort of get somebody to try something once, but persuasion doesn't typically end up in sort of internal long-term change in that other person. So for that reason, this list of what am I is not is something to really get clear about. We want to avoid it. And MI gives us things to do instead. And I'll say one more thing, and that's about lectures. We often go back and forth between all these things on this list, and they turn into lovely little lectures. Well, usually I ask my workshop audiences if anybody knows how many sentences we have. This has been proven long ago. On average, if we're lecturing to anybody in our lives, our partners or spouses, our teenagers, our kids, our colleagues, our clients, you only have about 3 sentences until they kind of shut you out and you sound like Charlie Brown's teacher, wah, 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 right? Just like being, judgmental, human beings aren't really made to be lectured to. I love to learn, and so, when I buy like a ticket to a lecture, I enjoy that, but I still get antsy in my seat and I'm kind of lecturing in this hour and a half too, which is not my favorite thing to do. I like a lot of interaction. It's a lot for somebody to take in, and lectures tend to shut people down. It's not collaborative. We're just telling. We're trying to tell people into change. And lectures take a lot of psychic energy. So this slide alone is most of the reason why MI results in all the other benefits of MI, helping people see what's in it for them to change and what's at risk if they don't change. The benefit of reducing burnout in staff, in helpers, is a bonus and really a worthwhile reason to learn this just as much as anything else. So this is the spirit of MI, and this is also from the founders, and this goes hand in hand with the skills. The skills help the spirit take place, and setting the tone or spirit or atmosphere of MI helps the skills work their best, and so there's sort of a self-feeding loop. So there's 4 components. The top is collaboration. So when we're working with a client, you might have good ideas, but we don't want it to be a matter of, hey, come on in and sit down and let me just tell you everything you need to do, what you're doing wrong, what you should do differently, and how you should do it, and here's the steps and when you should do it, and that's a one-way street, and that's like a lecture. We want to collaborate, so that person, even who was adversarial at the beginning, really defensive, we want to use our skills to convey to them, I'm walking beside you. I want to work together with you to come up with an idea, a plan, a solution, a step to take that makes sense to you, that you feel ready for, that fits with your values and your vision, that you have some of the ability to do, etc. Let's do that together. So collaboration, and that helps us be client-centered, which everybody knows that's the best way to go, right? If we're not client-centered, we're really missing out, and we're not going to have a plan that is likely to be very useful. To the right is evocation. MI is extremely evocative. In fact, in follow-up work I've done with lots of agencies over the years, as professionals adapt this approach and use it more and more throughout their day, just mix it in with all the other things they're doing, the professionals begin to talk less and clients talk more. And that's what we want. We want to evoke, so I use this silly hand signal, from clients first. What are their perspectives? What are their ideas? What matters most to them? How do they see it? How have they experienced? What do they think about it? What are their favorite ideas and steps to take? What has worked for them in the past? What makes sense to them? So we evoke those things from them. And then there's plenty of room for us to say, well, and in addition to that, I don't know if you want to consider this as well, but first evoke. And that keeps us from, if we seek to evoke first, that's the best way to make sure that we're not just talking at clients and telling them what to do all the time, that we really get in the habit of asking evocative questions and reflections. We also want to acknowledge the autonomy of the client. The truth is that clients do have autonomy. They will make a choice. We want to influence them to make choices that work better for them. But the more resistant a client is, the more important it is we let them know, I can't make you do anything. The only thing we can make anybody do is physically be, go from point A to point B. And we might need to do that if somebody's ill, right, or has fallen. But in terms of changing something, we have to let them know that we can't force them. Otherwise, people get distracted with proving that to us, if that makes sense. So you want to get that out of the way as a distraction by just saying things like, I know I can't make you, you're the one that has to decide. And then compassion is the fourth part of the spirit of MI. And that's really just the overall recognition of somebody's struggle. Even if we're irritated with them, even if we don't like them secretly, even if we feel frustrated with them, that we understand that they have struggles and they might be struggling with a particular behavior or two. Make sure my time's okay. So there are four. What's that?
Karen. I'm sorry,
Hi.
it's Karen. Before you go on, we have in the chat, Adam typed in a question.
Thank you.
Regarding the 5 things that MI is not.
Yep.
When you have an ongoing trusting relationship with the person served, are these workable methods of interacting? So I guess
that's a fantastic question. And here's the deal. First of all, we're all going to do a little bit of this once in a while. The main deal is to move away from doing these as our modus operandi. And to his point, if you have a terrific rapport with somebody, if they know that you don't have a hidden agenda, if they trust you, if you respect each other, if you have a really solid working rapport, some of these things will be just fine, right? Does that make sense? You still don't want to make them the front and center thing that you do, because in excess they're going to backfire with anybody. But you can be a little less careful. Maybe you do. What's that noise? Somebody mute themselves. Oh wow. Okay. So to your point, if you have a great rapport, and you have a little argument, or maybe you know them well enough that you might persuade them a little, yes, here and there. But we still don't want to make these things the main deal, because they don't do as much as being evocative and being collaborative. Does that make sense? The person that asked that, can you unmute and let me know if I answered your question appropriately?
That was an excellent answer. And when I wrote the question, you then move to the next slide. And I think after we do the spirit of MI slide, and you've developed that rapport that we're talking about, at that point, when the person knows you're on their side, and they're willing to accept more negative style of interaction, I think there are moments where it's actually evocative to do the 5 things, to be judgmental or adversarial in some way. But you have to pick and choose your moments, and there has to be the baseline of already being collaborative.
Yeah, that's
if you approach somebody initially that way, you're going to put them off.
Yeah.
But if you're already established a relationship and are being collaborative, there are moments, I think, in the process where it's quite safe to use a confrontational tone with somebody or to attempt to persuade. But again, that's kind of reliant on already having that rapport. Does
Right.
that make
And so,
sense?
yes, absolutely. And so, one of the things I often say is if you have a great rapport, you can be a little sloppier about it, or you can be a little looser, if you will, about these things. And also, I just want to reiterate that we do have to confront people. That's how they know what they're being held accountable for. And being held accountable is a gift. We have to hold people accountable. But the confrontational style is what we're talking about here, where we're sort of loud and in their face, etc. But yeah, first, I don't think any human being, I've been doing MI for years and years, and in direct service, now and again, I do a little lecture, or I might argue with somebody. Really? Do you really think? And you're exactly right. If your rapport is solid, rock solid, then people know your agenda and they're not. But I would still say these things are still kind of side, you can do them, but they're not particularly evocative like the other skills are going to be. So let's look at those skills. I appreciate that question, because in no way do we need to be purist or perfect with anything. So the four main skills are open-ended questions, affirmations, reflective statements, and summarizations. All together using these, and I know that everybody on here has used these some or most of the time. It's not that MI invented these, right? But it pulls these together as the core skills because of all the functions. Together, using these along with the spirit of MI, it moves people toward change. So let's take a look at some of the functions of open-ended questions. It tends to evoke more information because you're not locking somebody into a yes or no or one-word answer. And also psychologically, open-ended questions tend to give us more authentic, truthful information from clients. It's just how they work. So instead of, don't you think you should take your medicine every day, like we said, you can say, what do you think is at risk when you don't take your medication? So it's not that we're being nonchalant about taking the medication, and we've certainly given them the information that they need about the medication, but we're trying to collaborate with them on making a change themselves, right? So it tends to evoke more information. Open-ended questions also evoke awareness of risks and consequences of current behavior and the benefits of changing. So I have some sample questions coming up, but I'll try to. So it might be, how might your visits with your daughter go better if you got proper sleep the night before? So something as simple as that. That's a question that might evoke their awareness of benefits of changing their sleeping habits. It also is a way, open-ended questions can evoke strength and abilities. How can you use some of your skills to, learn how to cook these healthier meals for yourself, and try to get them to think about what do they already know and have about them that they could use toward a change. And just in general, open-ended questions lead clients to think in new and more thorough ways. Even if they don't answer you, open-ended questions usually have new thoughts roiling about in that person's mind so you can follow up later. Here's some samples. How might taking your medications on time help you stay healthy enough to visit with your family? What could happen if you don't participate in some form of light exercise? How could participating in social activities help with your depression? What's likely to be the result of you deciding to eat fresh foods regularly? In what ways could cooperating with your in-home worker keep you healthy and ready for outings with your family and friends? I just want to point out here, the questions actually we can devise open-ended questions toward the very things that we would have lectured them about. So in this example, I could lecture somebody about, don't you know that, if you do this, this, and this, you'll be ready for the outings with your family and friends, or I can ask them to think about it for themselves, first at least. What can I do to help make going to the senior center more feasible? What needs do you think haven't been met yet? How could you stay in better touch with your children if you learn to use the computer a little bit? I'm not suggesting that just asking the question gets you an immediate answer. A lot of times you're going to ask a brand new open-ended question, and that's what we want. We want to get people thinking differently, more broadly, for themselves about what's in it for me to do this change, what might be at risk if I don't do the change. Affirmations are important. They're not the same as praise. Praise is a judgy thing because we say good job, and we want to keep judgment out of it. And also, it tends to not be specific. Affirmations are shining a big spotlight on a client's strengths, abilities, achievements, successes, but we do it in a very factual, specific way. So instead of saying to an elderly person, great job at the group today, well, they don't, first of all, great is just my opinion. And it's not factual, but I want them to literally see what it is I'm talking about. So I want to say, you were helpful to 2 other people in group today and helped clean up the chairs afterwards. Those are factual and specific. The person can literally see what you're acknowledging. And so it helps people see themselves differently, often helps them see more of their own abilities and skills. It builds a sense of self-efficacy. I could do this and it's going to matter. It enhances our rapport with clients because, people tend to bond a little closer with someone who's willing to regularly point out their strengths and abilities. And affirmations, this last one, tend to increase the likelihood that the behavior will be replicated. So you want to affirm often and clearly. So it could be things like, you made the effort to call your son 2 times this week, even though he hasn't called you. You read that article and learned some things about your condition. I saw that you avoided salty snacks this week. I mean, whatever it might be, you want to let them know, I'm acknowledging this specific thing, and I want to make it more likely that you'll continue to do this positive or pro-social or healthy behavior again. So they're different. Sometimes people get their back up about praise and compliments because it feels kind of icky or it feels superficial or, you're trying to get me on their good side. And affirmations avoid all of those pitfalls because they're just the facts. They're just very specific and factual. So moving on, here's a whole bunch. You took your medication on time. I saw you talking with the other resident who was depressed. You're keeping your mind sharp with daily reading, etc., etc. Take a look at some of those. They're all factual and they're all very specific. So the person knows exactly what it is you are acknowledging. It can really help them begin to see themselves a little bit differently. Reflections is another skill, and that's really just kind of reflecting back. It's paraphrasing back what the client has said. Here are some of the main functions. First of all, it can really help the client be accountable for what they say. Sometimes clients say things in a really strong or skewed or negative way, and we want them to hear, what they've said. It also lets a client know that you're listening and working to understand, and this is very powerful. I think everybody on this panel would concur that being an excellent listener is really the biggest skill of communication. It's not all the fancy, smart, helpful things we say, as much as how am I listening? And am I conveying to that person that I'm listening? As a psychotherapist, and some of you folks might be, no matter what kind of therapy I did out there in the community, couples therapy, family therapy, individual, the most commonly heard complaint in all situations is so-and-so doesn't listen to me. We want to be heard. The reflections really help the person know You're really listening to me. And that strengthens the rapport. It's also an opportunity for us to be corrected if we reflect back, because we might not have heard it right, or maybe we were distracted, or we just interpreted it correctly. So it can help us stay more in tune, more on top of what they're really trying to convey. And, it helps the client hear things like their awareness about risks or consequences. So I might say, let me just see if I have, yeah, I'll give you some samples on the next slide. Um, of this. We want them to hear again anything they've said that indicate they understand the consequences of not changing and the benefits of changing. And also, by the way, empathy, which is extraordinarily important to express, is done through reflections, because they've just said something empathy is the great connector. I call it that. It's nothing more than reflecting the emotional content that you recognize in somebody else. That's all. Doesn't mean you feel the same. It doesn't mean you had the same experience. But as a human being, I can understand sadness. So I might say, you seem really sad about that. That has upset you very much. That seems unfair to you. You're really discouraged about that. It doesn't mean you agree with them. It doesn't mean anything except I think I understand emotional content that you're conveying to me. So here are some sample reflections. It really matters to you to keep in close contact with your daughter. You really want people to recognize that you're mentally sharp. You miss having the kind of freedom that driving gave you. It sounds like it's been very hard on you to give away some of your things. It seems one of the things that matters most to you is being able to see old friends. I think I hear that you want to hang on to as much independence as you can. You're sad about the rift between you and your oldest son. From what I understand, there doesn't seem to be enough ways for you to express yourself except through your art. So those are just simple reflections. And hopefully you can kind of see that they get at the heart of what the other person has said. Several of them express empathy very clearly, shows some understanding, a desire to understand, and therefore reflections help the other person be more likely to want to continue to talk with you. And they can be as evocative as open-ended questions because they're so on target. It helps us stay neck and neck with clients when we reflect, the important things that they are saying to us. Any questions about reflections? And summarizations they typically come at the end of a conversation, but they can also come, in the middle of a conversation. If there's too much, if the client maybe is all over the place and you want to kind of tighten up the focus, it provides direction. So when you summarize and kind of say, let me pull all this together, and then you kind of review the stuff you've talked about and check in to see if you missed anything, it's a way, you've taken that conversation and you've directed it to the next step. It can edit superfluous material. Sometimes clients are nervous or upset, or they just have a lot on their mind, or sometimes they're just trying to not talk about, the stuff that they need to talk about. And there's all kinds of superfluous material being said. When you summarize, you kind of leave that stuff out. You only reiterate the important themes and ideas that have been discussed so that they leave your conversation freshly reviewed with the important things that you've talked about. And in that way, it provides a bridge to the next step. So summarizations are important, and I suspect that all of you have used summarizations at least some of the time. They're really a powerful way to tighten up the focus and really help make conversations be really meaningful and focused on, the important stuff. Here's a sample summarization. And a lot of times, we need to look at our notes to do a summarization. It's not that you have to keep everything in your head and think, oh, what all did we talk about? Often we're taking notes anyway, and so you can use, this is a rather full summarization. So let me pull together what we've discussed today. The major factor in your depression is missing your children and grandchildren. That's one theme I'm reiterating. Another is you're angry because your driving privileges have been taken, and you're worried your family will start to forget about including you in outings. You feel people are pressuring you too much to make new friends. So I've reiterated three main themes, and that person is likely to feel really heard because, I'm reflecting the stuff we talked about. And then I ask, am I getting these things right? That's called a check-in, because I don't want to take over and decide on my own everything that was important. So it gives them a chance to add or edit. And then at the end of a summarization, maybe a question or a task to leave them with. What might be a way to ensure that your children, you remember that you want to keep being asked to come along to events and outings. So there's an open-ended question that they ask to continue to evoke, what might be the next step for that person. So all of those four skills are really important in moving people toward change. The main goals of MI. Oh, go ahead.
Barbara, I'm sorry to
Yes.
interrupt. Adam writes again, does summarization also serve to provide affirmation and reflection?
Yes. In fact, I wish I had my pointer. After I said, let's look at the sample. So let me pull together what we've discussed today. The next three sentences are actually reflections of what's been said. So great point. This summarization does not have an affirmation, but that's an excellent point, Adam. I might say in my summarization, you've been able to learn to cook 3 new healthy meals. And that would have been that. If that's factual and specific, it's an affirmation. And I would definitely put that in a summarization so that they hear yet again something that's being affirmed. So that's an excellent point. I might even change this to include that. In fact, maybe I will. Watch this. Oh, no, I can't. I'm not in Zoom, so I don't know how to do it. Okay. That's a great point. Yes. Affirmations can be repeated in those summarizations. Good stuff. So the main goals of MI are to establish that rapport. That has to come first, because we can be as skillful and do all the backflips with our skills and knowledge as we want. If we don't have a decent rapport, it's highly unlikely that we're going to influence them, and we probably won't learn much from them, not as much as we could. So what the second goal is to listen for change talk, elicit it, and elicit more of it. Change talk is anything that a client states that indicates a desire for change. Here's an example that I have. Oh, I'm sorry. A desire for change, like I don't want people in my business. So on the surface, that sounds like a complaint, but the underbelly is, in a life I prefer, this is what I want, right? So an ability type of change talk is anything that could be used in changing. So I can get along with other people if I want to. A reason for change might be, I better write things down like you suggested because I'll lose other stuff. Okay, so they see a reason to do something different. A need is very similar, need for change. This is keeping me from getting some of my independence back. So that person has let us know they haven't changed yet, but they see that there's a need for something to be different. And then commitment. Sometimes people say commitment statements. I promise to follow the instructions now. And we want to listen for change talk and land on it, if you will. That's what I call it, with the core skills to elicit even more change talk. So now I'm going to add it to that diagram that we use because it goes hand in hand with vision. When somebody tells us that they have a desire for something to be different, like, I wish people would stop telling me what to do, it's also telling us something about their vision. In a life I prefer, I don't have so many people telling me what to do. Ability. So maybe somebody says, I'm good at getting the game started at the center. Okay? And in a life they prefer, they want to be acknowledged for that kind of a skill. A reason to change might be, another example might be, I guess if I don't eat right, I'm not going to have energy to do outdoor activities. So before they've made any kind of change, they're letting us know there would be a reason for me And I would want to land on that with a question or a reflection, or maybe even an affirmation. A need for change. It might be, well, I guess if I want my kids to visit, I have to stop arguing with them all the time. Okay, they see a need for behavior change, and I might reflect, your kids are really important to you, and you see that arguing less might be helpful. Commitment to change. Before they even, maybe they've said it 10 other times, who cares? But they say, that's it. I'm not going to binge watch till 3 a.m. anymore because it makes me, it suppresses my immune system. And you could affirm them. So you're really aware that sleep is an important part of you being healthy. And to me, that is the nuts and bolts, or that's the mechanics of MI. Listening for change talk, landing on it with the core skills, open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, even summarizations if there's enough material to really build upon the change talk that they have. Instead of being hung up on clients saying, oh, I'm excited to change and I'm ready to do it and thank you for your help and I'm so ready to take step one. That's not usually what's happening. People are hinting at their awareness that there needs to be some kind of change, and we really want to capitalize on that by listening for the change talk, landing on it with the core skills. If this were a longer workshop, we would be practicing this for about 2 hours. That's what I do in my regular workshop, because it's really the crux of this approach is we start to listen to people differently. This is another reason why MI reduces the sort of negative talk that people have no longer irritate us as much, because we're busy being creative with it. We're looking for that nugget, if you will, of change talk, and then we land on it with the skills. So I'll do a couple of these here. The first one, I can't stand having people do everything for me. So what I hear is a desire for change. In a life I prefer, people aren't always doing everything for me. And so I might say it's a reflection. It's really important for you to feel independent. That's what I landed on it with. The next one, where is the respect that an old person deserves? That's just kind of a lament, right? It's just sort of a statement of dissatisfaction. But I hear some change talk in there. In a life I prefer, in this person's vision, I'm going to be more respected. And I might say, what is the way that you could let your family know you want more respect? So I've landed on it with an open-ended question. The third one, I'm not in touch with my kids and it makes me lonely. So that's somebody who's sort of making a complaint, just kind of sad, if you will. So I could land on it with a reflection of empathy. You sound sad about this, and then I might follow it up with who could help you figure out better ways to stay in touch with your kids. So I've capitalized on that little piece of change talk in there. That she didn't say she was going to do anything, but she sees a reason for something to be different. And that's what's going to make, that's the catch, is to land on the change talk, because the change talk is there, it's relevant to them. It came from them. It's not my reasons that they should change, but it's their reasons and needs for something to change. I'll do one more down here. Let's see. This person says, that's it. This is commitment talk. That's it. I'm going to start going to chair yoga. So, maybe they've said that for weeks now, but I'm talking with them. So I'm going to land on it and say, you sound enthusiastic about chair yoga, and it seems like it's going to be beneficial to you. So that's a reflection. And then I might follow it up with an open-ended question. Tell me the ways in which you know that yoga is going to help you. And so it's 100% client-centered, because it's their stuff, and I'm landing on that to build a case for change instead of sort of a prefab lecture or argument or persuasion I have about why she should do, chair yoga. And that's the way MI works. It listens to the content from the client and gives us the skills to do something with that, to build a case toward change, step by step. I do want to leave a few minutes for questions, so I'm watching my time carefully. But I wanted to ask the audience if this idea of listening for change talk and landing on it makes sense. If you would like, maybe somebody has a statement that a client has made to them, and you'd like me to demonstrate how you might land on it with some of the core skills, or just more explanation about change talk. Is there anything in chat? For some reason, I don't see any chat at all, so I don't know. I'm not sure if anybody's asking any
There's
questions.
nothing new in chat right now, but
Okay,
people may be putting something in.
okay, okay. So I want to say something about empathy, and I did mention that empathy is what I call the great connector. There's even an evolutionary theory about empathy. And it's not the same as sympathy. I'll talk about that in a minute. But the idea is that you know tens of thousands of years ago, all humans lived in tribes, right? And so the idea is that humans evolved this thing called empathy because if I'm empathic about somebody else in my tribe and they're empathic to the other person, we're all kind of watching out for each other in that way. Checking out each other's how we're doing emotionally, how are we doing overall. Then it behooves the tribe, right? It bodes well for the tribe. That's the idea. But nonetheless, human beings are such that when somebody expresses empathy to us, we are more likely to be open, to remain open to them, maybe even become more open. We're more likely to be trusting of them, and we're more likely to even possibly share a little bit more, uh, information with them. So, for instance, if you, at the end of the symposium today, after a long day of listening to lots of presentations, and you went home and said to your significant other, whoever that is, oh my gosh, I have a headache. It was such a long day, and I'm really hungry. And Barb lady lectured too much, right? So I'm irritated. And your person says to you, stop your fussing. Just go make me a sandwich, right? One of two things is likely to happen. We either dig our heels in and get really insistent, like, no, you don't understand. I got to tell you more about how bad it was. Or we fire that person. We walk away. We're mad. We probably shut down. We don't talk to them. We don't want to connect with them. Really, what we just want somebody to say is something as simple as, you sound like it was a frustrating day. Or it sounds like you've really had it. Or, you're really tired. It's very simple. And I'm sure that everybody on this panel has expressed empathy, but I do want to take a minute to discern, the difference between empathy and sympathy, because in the helping fields, if you will, there's often a conflation of those two words, and that can be confusing, but it also can mislead people to set empathy aside. And here's what I mean. Um, I know that somebody is confusing sympathy with empathy when they say, well, I can have empathy with these kinds of clients, but not that client who's nasty and hurts people. And I know that they're confusing sympathy and empathy because empathy is a way to, sympathy is feeling sorry for somebody. It's pity, right? And often our clients have stories that bring us to our knees. I mean, if we bring our heart to work, we're going to hear stories that really get to us, right? But to be an effective helper, we need to turn that sympathy into empathy, because empathy is where we can really help people move forward. If I deprive somebody of empathy because I think they're mean or nasty or have done terrible things, I'm making a mistake, because empathy is not about being coddling people or cutting people a break or feeling sorry for people. It's an extraordinarily practical thing to do to strengthen the rapport that we have with people and to make it more likely that they will be open to conversations about change, period. It's a different animal than sympathy. They both kind of start off the same. Oh, it sounds like you're really mad. Oh, you seem really disappointed about that. But sympathy kind of jumps into the pit of pity, and now you've got two people in the pit. Empathy stays up here above ground where I can actually be helpful. But one of the principles of MI is to be empathic across the board, not just with some clients, um, but with every client, because it is such an important way that people can remain connected with their client, build the rapport, help the person feel heard, and it increases the chances that our conversations will get through and that person will take some bricks out of their wall or, let down some of their defenses a little bit. It's just the way we are as human beings. So I wanted to emphasize how crucial I thought empathy was. I think empathy is, and it's actually been proven so in research. The good news is people can learn to be more empathic. Um, for some of us, it comes much more naturally, and for others of us, we really kind of have to practice it. But the best way, I think, to know what it is that is it a reflection of that other person's emotional content, whatever the emotional content is. So you don't have to be a wizard, or it's not fancy, or it's not, you don't have to be, have any kind of degree after your name to understand how to reflect somebody's emotional content. Any thoughts or questions about empathy itself or the difference between empathy and sympathy?
Barb, there's two questions in the chat.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll give you the first one and then maybe you want to
Yep.
answer that and we'll go on to the second. So the first
Sounds
one
good.
it's from Dawn, and she's wondering what's the best way to handle when your client is basically lying to you and you know it? How do you call them on it in a respectful way?
So this is such a great question. Lying is a behavior, and we do get to the point there sometimes we suspect lying, but then we get to the point with some clients where it's clear they're lying. Either we have the evidence in front of us or they've contradicted themselves or enough people have helped, whatever reason, okay? And so of course we don't want to turn to that person and go toe to toe and be confrontational about it or judgy about it because we know what happens with that, right? But I do want to address it because lying does get in the way. And the best way that I have found to use to address lying is to pull it to the front and let it be the behavior that you're building awareness of discrepancy about. So we've talked about all kinds of other behaviors, taking your medicine, exercising, getting sleep. Well, in this case, if somebody's lying to you, you're not really getting to some other important things anyway. So you bring it to the front in that discrepancy. Let me go back to this. I wish I had my pointer. But the behavior in this case would be lying. And you might say, without a judgmental tone, without being confrontational, without arguing, without lecturing somebody, that doesn't seem to be true, or that contradicts what you said before, or I can see here that what you're telling me is not the information I have, or, I have come to realize that you've been dishonest with me about that behavior. Tone of voice matters very much, because if I'm going to be all judgy with my tone of voice, I might as well just be confrontational. And I might say, what would be in it for you to be more truthful with me? And what's at risk if you aren't? What kinds of things might happen if you don't tell me the full truth? What could I do to make telling me the truth a little easier? In what way do you gain something by withholding important information? Not all, these are too many questions at once, but these are examples of things that you can do with lying without being drawn into an adversarial position, which, by the way, you can't force somebody to stop lying to you. This is also with somebody who won't answer questions or doesn't talk much. You make that behavior, pull that to the front in this diagram, and that's the behavior that you circle around, because you're not going to get to the other stuff anyway. And so without being judgmental, without being adversarial, without being argumentative and lecturing, you simply talk about that behavior as you would talk about any other behavior and circle the wagons. Listen for any change talk. Maybe they say, well, it's uncomfortable for me to give details. And you could say, it sounds like in a life you prefer, you would like conversations to be much more comfortable. And then I might ask, in what way might giving me more facts actually help that happen? Or, it just depends on what you're working on with the person and what you know about them. But the bottom line of what I'm saying is to let's not revert. We don't just use these skills on behaviors that we can tolerate, but if somebody's lying to us or staying silent and refusing to answer any questions, that suddenly now we're going to revert back to going toe-to-toe with them. It's a mistake. It makes it more likely they'll continue to lie or continue to be reticent. And meanwhile, we're fighting with a client about we'll never win. We'll never win. Even if we know there's something really bad at stake for them, and we can tell them that. We can say, if I don't get the proper information, I just want you to know that such and such could happen. But when you're talking to them about considering changing that, we want to avoid going toe-to-toe about it. We're going to wear ourselves out, and we're probably going to invite them to put more bricks in the wall. So the person that asked that, can you let me know how that was for you?
That was excellent. Thank you. Very helpful.
Of course, sure. Listen, I worked mostly with juvenile delinquents most of my career, so, this stuff, it works. Not 100% of the time, but most of the time it really is. It's just a much better way of working with someone who's lying. Okay, and then there was another question.
Yes, the next one comes from Mars. It says, any good pointers for when reflections and summarizations lead the person to become agitated by their own false narratives or phrasings?
Oh, absolutely. So maybe you reflect. So let's say you reflect, and one of the functions of that reflection is to really kind of hold them accountable for something they said. So maybe they've been talking about their kids and how, angry and frustrated they are with their kids, and maybe they've said some nasty stuff about their kids, and you reflect back something like, so you're really irritated with your children and feel kind of a real disconnect. Maybe they don't like hearing that. And they say, why would you say that? I didn't use those words. Or, you make me sound like I hate my kids. And you might say, from what I understand, you have a lot of frustration. So help me understand that differently. Help me know what's upsetting to you about hearing that. Or help me know what I got wrong. There's nothing wrong with giving them an out and saying, you know what, maybe I misinterpreted. Explain it again to me. In that way, reflections hold people accountable. When people are upset, or a lot of times people just say things in a really harsh or, punitive or hateful way. And when you reflect back, they don't like hearing that. And you might simply say, gotcha, help me understand what you really meant. Or that seems to be upsetting to you. What do I need to know about that? Or what did I misinterpret? I think humility is such a central part of being an effective helper, being willing to be wrong. And, I'll just add on to that. Long ago, gave up any need for any client to ever say, Barb, you're right. I'm not worried about being told I'm right. I'm worried, I'm concerned with doing the right thing. And so sometimes you let people save face, and you can use empathy then if they're upset. That's where you would make some empathic statements. You seem really upset about that. That has you feel, it seems like that has you feeling angry. Help me know more about that. And what could we do differently so that this feels better to you? So the person that asked that, how was that for you?
Yes, that was excellent. Thank you. That answered
Sure.
my question.
Yeah.
And Barb,
So-
we have one more. We have one more in here.
Great.
Another one came in. It's from Deb. It says, so I know it's emotional content, she has in air quotes, but your description of empathy is sounding like simply reflective listening.
It is.
Can you describe the difference between the statements in both?
There's not. reflections, let me go back to something I have on reflections, the bottom of this list. Empathy is expressed through reflections. Not all reflections are empathy, but when we're talking to a person and they've either said what their emotional content is, I'm sad, I'm depressed, I'm angry, or you're reading it through their body language and facial expression, when we express empathy in that case, it's through reflective listening. We're saying, you seem really upset about that. That seems to have you feeling very angry, because we are in the moment reflecting the emotional content. So reflections, one of the functions of reflections is sometimes to express empathy. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I guess I always thought there was an extra weightiness to empathy of the listener's emotional support.
Well, you can, because this is a short presentation, I don't have time for a lot of practice and stuff with it, but like a more complex reflective statement might really give us a chance. So it might be, on the one hand, you feel extremely upset about the way your children are treating you. And on the other hand, you wish people would understand how difficult it is for you to make phone calls and write letters and stay in touch. So you're kind of conflicted. Like sometimes there is a lot to emphasize with, several things to empathize with. The important thing is that the empathy we're not putting any words into anybody's mouth, that it's really reflects, we're not trying to feed them the way to feel. It's a reflection of what they're saying or conveying in some way they already do feel, as a way to connect. And often it's important, if somebody's really upset in your presence, you make an empathic statement and then shut up for a while, right? You don't want to just keep talking at somebody. So I might say, wow, this is really, really upsetting to you. And then I might just want to just sit for a minute and not keep yapping at the person, because if they're really drawn up in their emotion, I'm going to sort of be careful about, giving them some space and some time. So it's just that empathy doesn't always have to be this big, heavy, profound statement. It can be very simple. So you're frustrated about that. But it can also be a really hefty, weighty issue that you're talking about, and you spend more time and you maybe ask more gentle questions to find out more about how they're feeling. And that just depends on what you're doing with them, at the time. What else is going on? How was that, the person that asked that?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Yep.
Sure. So I don't want to I know people have to move on to other sessions. So thank you for the opportunity to present this material. I'm really glad I did. You're free to email me with any questions. And finally, this is not on I just added this. Here's an article that you might be interested in reading. So if you want to write that down, I saw lots of articles, but I perused this one. It's at that website, uofazcenter on aging.com, just as an adjunct to what we did here today. So thank you, everybody.
Barbara, thank you so much for sharing with us. It was really educational and informative, and there's lots of nice comments here. Super duper presentation. Thank you, Barb.
Thank you.
Yeah, so lots of folks here thanking you and saying how informative everything was.
Wonderful. I'm so glad. Thanks for the honor, and enjoy the rest of your day, everybody.
Take care.